Well, hello and welcome to this video masterclass. My name is Dominic Fuge and I'm the Head of Careers and Higher Education at Cardiff Sixth Form College, Cambridge. It's my pleasure to have been asked to provide this video masterclass with you today. It's filmed sometime in July and I believe it's going to be used later this year. And today we're going to be covering the transition between boarding school to universities. And of course, over the last decade or so, I've seen a huge number of students, international students, home students, move from boarding school to a university in the UK or to a university overseas, the US, Hong Kong, Canada, Australia, Europe, throughout Europe, wherever it might be. So I hope I can draw upon some of those experiences to give you a bit of information in terms of the preparation that you might need for that transition between school, college, and getting into higher education, to university. So just to give you an overview as to what you might expect throughout today's video masterclass for the next 10 to 15 minutes or so, I'll give you a brief introduction to myself and also to the career support that we provide at the college. And we'll look at some of the similarities and differences between boarding school and university. You'll perhaps be surprised that there are many similarities, and that's useful when we're thinking about the skills that students have already developed and how they could further sharpen those and utilise those when they get into higher education, as well as thinking about some of the new experiences that they may have and therefore preparing for that transition, that next step. And we'll wrap up with some top tips for how to successfully thrive within a higher education environment. As we know, students work extremely hard to get to their best fit universities, and we want to make sure it's not just about getting in, whilst that's very important, and actually maybe that's a topic for another video masterclass. It's not just about getting in, it's also about doing really well when you get into university, staying at university, succeeding at university, and using higher education as a stepping stone for the next step of your journey, whether that's the world of work, entrepreneurship, or further postgraduate study. So, as we've previously mentioned, my name is Dominic Fuge. I'm the Head of Careers and Higher Education at Cardiff Sixth Form College, Cambridge. As you perhaps know, Cardiff Sixth Form College has two branches, one the original in Cardiff and another branch that was established in 2022 in Cambridge. There are some slight differences. Whilst it's one college and two campuses, that's the model that we apply, there are some slight nuances in terms of choosing between the institutions. This is the fourth school where I've worked. And so I have a range of experiences that I've cultivated over the last decade or so, working in London, in Oxford, and now in Cambridge. I actually have a background in teaching, so I used to teach A-level and GCSE psychology, as well as leading on the extended project qualification. And in previous schools, I've been sometimes a 0.5 of an FTE of a full-time equivalent. So I've half been a teacher, half been head of careers, for example. But the real sweet spot I think that I found is actually having the opportunity to 100% focus and do research and network and hopefully also thrive within the sector, focusing purely on careers and higher education. It's a real luxury to be able to put all of my time into this particular sector. And I myself studied at 3 UK universities. So I did my undergraduate degree at Durham University in the northeast of England. I went to Edinburgh to do my master's, and I also did another postgraduate qualification at Cambridge as well. You'll see at the bottom bullet point there that I also have an upcoming publication, which I'm really excited about. This is, I believe, the first book actually in the globally in the world to be focusing on the new style UCAS personal statement. So, as you perhaps know, UCAS are changing. Since I think their founding in 1993, UCAS are changing the requirements of the UCAS personal statement to now have 3 subsections as opposed to one 4,000 character free text. And this book looks at those changes, whilst also actually is quite cumulative and takes the reader throughout the journey of thinking about which institution is the best fit, all the way through other bits of research, finding experiences in terms of supercurricular profile building, university application strategy, and then eventually writing the personal statement. There are 6 personal statement examples written in the new format in this book, and I've also produced a commentary for each personal statement. You can see with the image on the left that we now actually have the Cardiff Sixth Form College logo on the book as well, which is a hugely exciting aspect of the publication, is to have this joint with our institution. So next now on your screens you can see 8 building blocks, and you might be wondering why I'm subjecting you to these 8 blocks on your screen. Well, the reason is I wanted to share a bit more of our careers program, because we've specifically designed the careers program in order to help students thrive in the future. So it's useful to look at what they do during school in order to think about that transition from boarding school to university. So whether it's personal communication and social skills, public speaking, supercurricular profile building, a lot of what students do, having a growth mindset for example, a lot of what students do during their boarding school time will actually be useful, of course, when they're at university. So certainly the better they do during their time at boarding school, what I'm trying to say is I think the better that they will thrive within higher education. So do keep in mind, for students, keep in mind what they've actually enjoyed and what they've experienced so that they can utilise this throughout their university journey. So this leads us on quite nicely to look at the similarities and differences between boarding school and university. So just starting with the similarities, living away from home, the majority of students will be moving from boarding school to university where they live at university as well, especially within the first year. Depending on the country you go for university, universities tend to have accommodation for students around the university buildings maintained by the university. And then in the second and third year, for example, students may live out and find some friends and find their own accommodation, rent their own accommodation. But having that experience of being away from home, having been in boarding school, and then going to university really sets students up nicely because they've been through that before. They know what it's like to be in an unfamiliar environment, make friends, prepare their rooms how they want them, for example. So that's a nice transition when we're thinking of boarding school and university, having already had that experience of living away from home. That's a huge benefit. Participating in clubs and societies. Naturally within schools, within boarding schools, there are lots and clubs and societies. Sports, for example, that students can do, other extracurricular, non-academic hobbies that students may be interested, they can do that within boarding school. While university, I would say, has a larger range actually of clubs and societies which students can participate in. Actually, some universities, especially in the UK, have a particular day designated within the week where there are no contact hours, so no lectures, for example, so students can focus on their studies independently, but also have enough time to participate in various sports or other hobbies and activities that they have. I would really recommend to find a couple of sports and hobbies and interests when you're at university, because of course it's a great way to make friends, to socialise, also to de-stress. If you're having a relatively intensive academic environment, to participate in a few sports or other hobbies is a lovely way to be able to do something a little bit different. Maybe also to take part in activities that they haven't done before, maybe find a new sport, new hobby, new activity. Meeting new people and community living. So going back to that idea of living away from home and being in the environment of a boarding school, often you'll have students with a range of different backgrounds, nationalities. University again mirrors some of that. So the experience of community living will help students in that transition of boarding school to university. It's one of the similarities there. Also developing time management. Naturally within boarding school, you live within your school environment, so you have to get up. You have to go to various events and of course your classes. The difference perhaps is, we'll move on to some differences, I'm kind of going a little bit ahead of myself, but one of the differences will be that no one will be knocking on your door and getting you ready, but at least you've developed some of that time management already. So maybe a student may have a knock on the door if they need to within boarding school because they have that nurturing environment which is there to help them. But at least they've developed some of those skills and they'll further build upon that when they go to university. But definitely having experienced managing your time, that's a similarity when we're looking at university. So some of the differences, a huge difference is the academic syllabus really has no bounds. So whether students are doing A-levels or the International Baccalaureate or whichever kind of academic model they happen to be doing, naturally there is content that you have to learn, you'll be tested on that content. Well, when you go to university, whilst there are textbooks, the textbooks are huge and the content that you can cover is literally boundless. So you'll have topics and areas of study, but the research that you do and the information that you gain and gather has no bounds. And that, I think, having been a student myself, and having spoken to our alumni who have recently graduated from the college, and we like to stay in contact with all of our valued alumni, that they do notice that they're used to having to memorize and absorb a set amount of information. When you go to university, there is the essential reading and the things that you have to really know. But then you can go into your own areas of research and really absorb a huge amount of information, to the point where there are topics and areas and core readings and so on, but there's not really a set piece of studying that you're doing. So that's a new situation to be part of. As I mentioned earlier, there are more clubs and societies, more activities to do, more things to do in your free time. But cooking perhaps is one. Generally in boarding schools, students have access to breakfast, lunch and dinner. Naturally, on occasion, they may want to cook with their friends, they may want to eat out, so that already happens. But when you go to university, whilst there are catered options, especially depending on the university you go to, and food and dinner can be a bit cheaper for students, again depending on the institution, there is also more scope to engage in your own cooking. So that's a little difference there. And a greater emphasis on time management, as I've mentioned earlier, time management skills. I thought it might also be useful to look at some key terminology that you might hear at university which you haven't perhaps heard within a school setting. One is the difference between summative and formative assessments. So often universities will have formative assessments which are very similar to mock exams, for example, in schools. So they'll test specific knowledge and they'll help students develop their skills for the later exams or coursework, but they won't necessarily be marked to the point where they count towards your actual grade when you are assessed at university. So there are often formative assessments at the beginning to help students prepare, and then summative are the assessments that actually do count. Modules and electives, so each year is made up of a range of different topics and different subject areas that you can cover. Often they're called modules and electives as you choose what you want to study, as you design your program. Generally speaking, in the first part of the degree, there is less flexibility as you have to study certain core areas. And then as you progress throughout your studies, you have more flexibility to be able to choose which modules, which electives you want to have as part of your academic program. This varies, of course, between countries. In the UK, for example, there's less of this emphasis on liberal arts and sciences, so you choose your subject area and you pursue that from day one. You may be able to have an optional module, maybe in a language or another subject area that is not your primary subject, but it's a little bit different to the majors and minors module that you have in North America, for example. But anyway, the term modules, electives, that's quite important. University stash. I've passed one, so Freshers' Fair, I should say firstly actually, just looking back at the bullet points. When you start university, there is a week or sometimes 2 weeks Freshers' Week, designed for students where they can make friends, learn about, so go to a range of talks to learn about the location and what's available within the university, how things are done. And they can also sign up to lots of clubs and societies at the Freshers' Fair. Even when you progress into year 2, year 3, you can go back to the Freshers' Fair to find more activities. But it's a really, really important and quite fun thing to do, which I would really recommend that you take advantage of when you go to university. So be rest assured, you will have a couple of weeks for orientation. And as an international student, if you are an international student for that country, you often have even more time where the international students arrive a little bit earlier so that they can get used to everything. University stash, so clothing, again depending on your institution there'll be a range of options. Students quite like to wear their own branded jumpers and other merchandise, sports for example as well, lots of branded clothing that you can get. Formals and other nuances, so some institutions, Durham, Oxford, Cambridge, they have formals normally every week where you'll wear an academic gown depending on your college, and you'll have quite a nice dinner all together, or you'll sign up and there'll be a number of spaces available and there'll be maybe a rotation. That's just one example, but every university will have its own nuances and ways of doing things and society and culture. So it's worth paying attention to that and thinking about what those nuances are. As we wrap up and get closer to the end of the presentation, in the last 2 slides, I wanted to just return to think about what you actually want to get from university. What's your return on investment? Naturally, you want to build skills, both social and academic, to help you with your future. You'll want to enhance your professional network and job prospects, and hopefully enjoy your time. Those are, I think, the 3 main areas, and it's worth keeping that in mind when you're preparing for that transition between boarding school and university life, university study. So finally, looking at the top tips, how do you maximise when you're at university and therefore helping you with that transition between boarding school and university? Well, you should take advantage of all of the opportunities. Of course, going back to one of the similarities and differences, you need to manage your time effectively. But as much as you can, the more that you do, the more that you learn and grow and meet people and network and develop personally. So I would recommend, there are so many activities and things that you can do which maybe you haven't done before. Take full advantage. University actually, over the a couple of years, or 3, 4, 5 years, or depending on your course that you'll be there for, it does go very quickly. So maximise, enjoy, take advantage. Don't leave anything to the last minute as well. You are managing your time in a different way, a greater way than you are, more intensity than you are at boarding school perhaps. There's a lot to do. So make sure that you're not leaving things to the last minute where you have to end up being in the library, for example, working for many, many hours into the night. A little bit every day and often is a lot better than doing a lot last minute. So just keep that in mind. There's a lot to juggle. Have some good planning and strategies. Ensure that you're working often and regularly in order to make sure that you meet all of the deadlines and reduce any possible stress as you're having to work very hard. Utilise the university careers office. That's a really important one. Here, me being a careers person, I'm thinking about the next step, getting into university. When you're at university, there are career teams, departments, where they help students with the next step, whether it's the world of work, further postgraduate study. You can often have an unlimited number of meetings and ways that they can support you within these departments. Maximise on that. They'll help you maybe with interviews, finding jobs, work experience in order to help you again with the next step of that journey. So know who the careers team are and take advantage. The final bullet point is to build and maintain your network. So I like to keep in contact with our alumni, as I mentioned earlier. Do stay in contact with your boarding school, actually. They can help you with future applications, with networking, and it's just nice to stay in contact, see what's happening, keep that relationship going. Same with your friends where you were at boarding school with. They will later become future colleagues, maybe relevant people in the industry, and build and of course then maintain the network from university as well. Networks, as we all know, are hugely important. So I hope you found this video masterclass useful, and I wish you very best of luck for the future.